Iran is opening a new front against Israel from Sudan, using bases in the sub-Sahara country to point ballistic missiles at the Jewish state. But this is only one aspect of this conflict, as a severe warning has been placed on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's desk to prepare for a prolonged campaign against Iran. And meanwhile, to the north, Turkey is purchasing a large batch of new fighter jets out of apparent fear of Israel, while warnings are also coming that time is running out for Israel to make a decision on the next steps vis-a-vis Lebanon and Syria. And in recent weeks, Hezbollah smuggled hundreds of rockets from Syria into Lebanon. So how will Israel respond? To the south, it now is Houthis versus the United Nations in Yemen, as the terrorist organization broke into a major United Nations facility in Sana'a this last week, taking employees as hostages and looting assets. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Hamas is with its back to the wall, and the golden cages in Gaza are collapsing one after the other. The pace of releasing the remains of fallen hostages has almost come to a standstill, and it is obvious that this is a deliberate policy by the Hamas terrorists. They are trying to create conditions that will prevent its sidelining in the Gaza Strip. And in this context, Monday evening's release of another set of remains might be too late and too little. The remains were taken to the Institute of Forensic Medical in Israel, and we will have to see what they determined. But Hamas is obviously trying to evade President Trump's deadline, while Israel is waiting for a green light from Trump to apply sanctions on the ground in the Gaza Strip. And in a related story, Israel provided proof that a Palestinian man who lost his life in the Gaza Strip recently while working for a German film production company was a Hamas member, so the German company halted their cooperation with this company. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. So Iran is behaving like a wounded animal and has not abandoned its aspirations to eliminate Israel and to achieve regional hegemony. At the same time, in the other arenas, the situation remains very sensitive. In Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Syria, the strategic challenges are still far from over, and there are also new challenges arising in other arenas. For example, Iran is deepening its grip in Sudan by transferring weapons and advanced technologies, establishing logistical infrastructure in ports, and integrating with local militias. The move may enable deep strikes from the Red Sea and the Mediterranean theater and increase the threat to Israel and the maritime passages in the Suez Canal in combinations with attacks from the Houthis in Yemen. And another rising challenge is coming from Turkey, which, along with other NATO countries, is in the midst of a large military buildup. But the question is, will Turkey's weapons be used to deter Russia and Iran, or will they be pointed elsewhere? This week, United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer signed a deal to sell $11 billion worth of military equipment to Turkey, highlighting that the purchase of 20 advanced fighter jets is coming. Germany removed its veto on the deal in July after blocking it due to concerns about Turkey's foreign policy. And in Yemen, the Houthi rebel group broke into the UNHCR headquarters, the headquarters of the United Nations in Sana'a, confiscated databases, and detained employees for long hours. And according to reports, this is part of a wave of attacks against international institutions across Yemen. Back in Israel, the intelligence echelon is warning of approaching need for a decision on the next steps against the Hezbollah terrorists after signs emerged that Hezbollah smuggled hundreds of rockets from Syria to Lebanon just in recent weeks. In meetings held this week by the senior American officials who visited the country, Israel asked to continue striking in Lebanon, as this is a violation of the agreement, as patience is wearing thin with the conduct of the terrorist organization. The IDF also continues to work in the Gaza Strip as Hamas has its backs to the wall, and the IDF is concentrating its efforts on demolishing Hamas's strategic tunnels in which the terrorist organization held Israeli hostages. And at the same time, Division 99 completed the fighting in the Gaza Strip and the Chief of Staff convened an operational forum to summarize 2 years of war. And meanwhile, President Trump set a 48-hour deadline for the Hamas to return more remains of fallen hostages, and now the terrorist organization pays lip service with the remains of just one hostage. Hamas transferred the remains, which were located in a neighborhood in the Gaza City area, to the Red Cross, which then turned it over to the IDF forces in the Gaza Strip. After the identification process at the Institute of Forensic Medicine, 12 fallen will officially remain in the Gaza Strip. Searches in Gaza continues, while Israel's intelligence echelon assesses that Hamas can return at least 8 more, including Hadar Golding and Asaf Hamami. In any case, President Trump's response to this cynical act will reveal the process of the ceasefire in the foreseeable future, while in Jerusalem they are considering expanding the hold on the ground as a sanction against Hamas, which has not returned any remains of the fallen for about a week. However, everything depends on the American approval. And speaking of the Americans, the chairman of the United States Joint Chief of Staff will arrive in Israel this week with a visit to the joint headquarters in Kiryat Gat, an Israeli city, on his agenda. And meanwhile, the terror organization Hamas is trying to reshape reality in the Gaza Strip and ensure its political and military survival through the Hezbollah model in Lebanon, which includes indirect control of management and security mechanisms under the guise of a technocratic government and international support. There is also a dispute over the United Nations mandate for a force in the Gaza Strip. On one side, there are Arab states who want the force to be established according to Chapters 6 and 7 of the United Nations Charter, which would make it a full official force. Israel, by contrast, fears the precedent that will be created. So we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel amidst the continuing battle against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Soon, we might have to add Sudanese militias and maybe even the Turkish military to this list. Got a call yesterday late at night, and the IDF spokesperson's unit invited me into the Gaza Strip. So today I had to change all my plans and pack my bag and head towards the Gaza border, and we're entering into Bet Hanun with the IDF today to check out the situation on the ground and, most importantly, how the IDF is dealing with 60% of Hamas's terror tunnels still operational in Gaza. And this is time for Boots on the Ground. So join me. And guys, after almost 2 hours of driving, I've arrived to the Gaza border, and now I'm waiting for the IDF spokesperson's unit to let us go inside Gaza and check out the situation on the yellow line for ourselves. And a moment before we begin, I want to call on you to continue in spreading the truth. Share and follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so that you will stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So in recent days, the IDF has concentrated its efforts dealing with several strategic tunnels that Hamas built over the years in the Gaza Strip. And these are giant tunnels, about 4 kilometers long, that cross the Gaza Strip from west to east. And some of them are 30 to 40 meters deep underneath the ground. These tunnels are the nerve center, prominence, and power of the Hamas terrorist organization. And they include command and living quarters for senior Hamas officials, production halls for missiles, and communications rooms alongside passage gateways for moving Hamas forces beneath the surface. The location of the tunnels have been known to the IDF and to the Shin Bet for many months, but the IDF refrained from dealing with them out of the understanding that some of them held Israeli hostages alive. In recent days, after the release of all the living hostages, a decision was made in the Southern Command to concentrate efforts on these tunnels, part of which are located east of the Yellow Line in territory that is under Israeli control. In the past 24 hours, after several days of activity, the IDF demolished one of the main tunnels near the Jordanian hospital in Gaza City, and there are several more tunnels that the IDF is currently working on preparations for demolishing. Also this week, Division 99 has completed its mission in Gaza, and so on Sunday, this unit formally rotated out of the area of the Gaza Strip for refreshment, and in its place, Division 252 entered. Division 99 took part in Operation Gideon's Chariots and shaped the deployment of forces along the Yellow Line together with Division 162 and 143. The division's forces destroyed hundreds of weapons depots, observation posts, combat complexes, and terrorist infrastructure above and below the ground, and inflicted significant damage to the enemy's capabilities, and also took part in establishing the Yellow Line and in the humanitarian assistance effort in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. And amidst all of this activity, and despite the ceasefire, the political echelon has not yet officially declared the end of the Iron Swords War, but in the last 24 hours, the IDF made another symbolic move of ending this war. And IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir convened an operational forum with the participation of all commanders of operational units from Lieutenant Colonel and above, and the IDF Senior Command Forum. The conference was defined as a staged summary of this war, but in practice, its purpose is to summarize the 2 years of intensified war in the Gaza Strip and in other sectors. The IDF says that the forum is convening for the first time since the Chief of Staff took office against the backdrop of the change in the operational situation in the Gaza Strip, 2 years of fighting, and the process of strengthening the foundations and the routines that are currently being implemented inside the IDF. The IDF also decided to adjust the differential status between the sectors in Gaza and in the Air Force. There continues to be a technical state of war, while in the other arenas there is a lower level of intensity. This will allow the IDF to begin with the forced buildup and adjustments to the unit structures accordingly. This includes training, exercises, which have been rare in the last 2 years, as almost the entrance of force. The entire force of the IDF, both regular and reserves, were engaged in active operations in Gaza, Lebanon, Judea and Samaria, and other arenas. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this subject, so keep spreading the truth, share, and let as many people as possible know what's happening here so that they will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, I've just told you about how the IDF is beginning to make the adjustments to a post-war environment, but it's not just the IDF. All of Israeli society is entering into a new period, and many people are having to make many different adjustments to their daily routine and to their long-term plans. That includes issues related to work as well as also financial decisions. And here at TBN Israel, we're trying to do what we can to help, and that includes partnering with organizations and companies who are making a real difference in the lives of millions of ordinary Israelis around the world. So if you watched our shows before, you probably already know about the miracle of Arza, which is one of our partners. And now, I'm really excited to share this with you. Arza has launched their brand new Hope Box, or Tikva in Hebrew, and it's their most beautiful box yet. And with the release of the living hostages, and please God, the rest soon, this theme of hope couldn't come at a more powerful time for all of you to join. Every single item inside your Arza box is handmade by local Israeli artisans and family businesses. So, with your purchase, you're directly blessing and supporting the people of Israel while bringing the land of the Bible where Jesus walked right into your houses. Inside, there's this gorgeous hope necklace with the Star of David and the map of Israel, delicious foods and also spices, and an amazing ceramic dish made by a group on the Gaza border not far from where I'm standing right now that employs youth with disabilities. They're only selling this box for 10 more days, and it's almost sold out. Plus, they've just increased our discount. You'll get 15% off with the code TBNIL15. So, if you love Israel, or you know someone who does, this is the perfect way to experience and to share the beauty and the hope of the Holy Land. So go to artsabox.com/TBNIL and get yours today. Again, that's artsabox.com/TBNIL. Make sure to use the coupon code for a 15% discount, TBNIL15. Now, we're getting back into the news and keeping our focus on the Gaza Strip, where, according to information provided by the Red Cross, a coffin containing the remains of a fallen hostage was transferred into its hands late on Monday evening, which they later transferred to the IDF forces inside the Gaza Strip. Later, the coffin arrived at the National Center of Forensic Medicine, where identification and an investigation of this cause and circumstances of the death were conducted. And despite this release, Israel is considering expanding the area that it holds inside the Gaza Strip as a sanction against Hamas due to the fact that the terrorist organization has not returned remains since last Tuesday, when Aryeh Zalmanovich and Tamir Eder were returned for burial in Israel. And meanwhile, hours before the expiration of the ultimatum that was set for Hamas by the United States President Donald Trump, the Saudi news portal Asserts al-Awsat reported at noon on Monday that the organization informed the mediators to the agreement that it is about to extract between 7 and 9 sets of remains. And according to the report, ostensibly based on a source close to the process of searching for the remains of the hostages, Hamas has managed to verify the location of 7 to 9 hostages in areas of rubble in different places in the Gaza Strip. The source noted that the remains will be handed over to the Red Cross immediately after they are extracted, but the report did not specify an exact time. According to that source, that operatives of Hamas's military wing continued to work following the arrival of heavy equipment that is intended to aid the search and the rescue operations for the remains. And meanwhile, despite the fact that in Jerusalem they are examining the possibility of imposing sanctions on the terrorist organization, it is not clear if and when the United States will allow this, given that it supervises the agreement with Hamas and approves every Israeli step in this conflict. For instance, sources familiar with the details of ongoing operations said this week that under pressure from the mediators, the IDF withdrew from the area where the searches for the remains are being conducted in territory under its control in the Gaza Strip beyond the yellow line, out of fear of a confrontation with the Hamas operatives. And speaking of which, those Hamas operatives from the shadow unit that was responsible for guarding the hostages accompanied the Red Cross personnel in the search for the remains. On the Saudi Al Arabiya network, it was reported this week that Hamas provided information on the locations of bodies to the Egyptian team, and the El Haddad portal reported that Hamas provided maps to the Egyptian teams. In any case, Jerusalem is coordinated with the Americans, and in Israel, they hope that after the contacts are exhausted and the end of Trump's deadline, there will be a green light from the White House to impose new sanctions. And meanwhile, the Rafah crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip remains closed, and it has been more than a week since its opening was postponed. And alongside the tight American oversight, the visits of senior officials to Israel also continued this week. United States Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Don Kane, will arrive in the coming days to Israel and will visit the American headquarters in Kiryat Gat. Kane visited Israel in the middle of the month with President Trump, and then he met with the Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir. He also attended President Trump's speech in the Knesset. And amidst all of this activity, the failure to return the remains of the fallen hostages is effectively denying and delaying the continued implementation of the agreement and the transition to Stage B. The ultimatum sent by the American president, according to which he is watching closely what will happen in the next 48 hours, stems from the fact that the United States was convinced that Hamas is lying about the location of the fallen hostages. It is also important to point out that both Israel and the United States are not particularly pleased with Hamas's conduct at present. According to Israel, a number of hostages and their bodies are within immediate reach and can be transferred to Israel at any moment. Amongst them, Colonel Asaf Hamami and Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, but Hamas chooses to keep them. In this context, the single set of remains that Hamas released on Monday evening appears to be little more than lip service that Hamas is trying to pay to the American President Donald Trump, a minimal achievement that he can point and to calm the frightened Hamas back into the framework of this agreement. And on the other side, President Trump too, despite his commitment to the agreement he crafted and his enjoyment of the peacemaker image that he worked to sell, is beginning to lose patience on two fronts. Hamas's contact on the ground does not reflect well on the President Trump. The mass executions of civilians, Palestinians, and figures in the Gaza Strip leave a bad taste in the Americans' mouth, and the issue has surfaced in the president's support circles. And on the second front, according to foreign reports, President Trump is disappointed and is pressuring the Gulf states, while he was sure that the Gulf countries would show great willingness to help realize the agreement. Saudi Arabia and Qatar are piling on difficulties and on demands for completing the influence in the Gaza Strip in exchange for funding its future reconstruction. For its part, Hamas is not quick to surrender. It understands that the goal of President Trump's plan is to eliminate its military power and to later assume it in the Gaza Strip politically. It is also trying to move in the opposite direction. Senior security officials assess that Hamas is working to imitate the Hezbollah model in Lebanon. For instance, Hezbollah has representatives in Lebanon's government and also in the parliament, and it holds a large military force and refuses to disarm. And last weekend, representatives of all the important Palestinian factions convened in Cairo to discuss the composition of the body that will manage the Gaza Strip on the day after the war until general elections are held. Hamas's deception plan has already manifested in these discussions in Cairo, but in the joint statement it was announced that all factions agreed on the establishment of a temporary Palestinian committee of independent technocrats to manage the Strip's affairs and provide basic services in cooperation with Arab states and international institutions. And senior security officials say that at least half of the members of this committee will be Hamas front men, and it will effectively be able to continue to rule de facto in the civilian decision-making and the reconstruction system inside the Gaza Strip. Israel has no veto right to disqualify members of this committee, and Hamas, which plans to continue holding its weapons, will effectively control the committee and its decisions. And sources in the Gaza Strip claim that Hamas has designated its associate Amjad el-Sawaw to head this committee. Hamas is also preparing for the introduction of an international force into the Gaza Strip, and the Palestinian factions made a decision on taking steps to maintain security and stability in Gaza and supporting efforts to achieve a United Nations decision to establish temporary international forces to supervise the ceasefire. However, Hamas leader Khalil al-Haya announced last weekend that Hamas will not give Israel any pretext to return to war. In an interview with Al Jazeera, al-Haya also clarified that Hamas has no objection to any national figure residing in the Gaza Strip to manage the Gaza Strip operations and normal activities, and noted that all management powers will be transferred to the management committee, including security management. He added that there is agreement with Fatah regarding international forces that will deal with the separation in the buffer zone and the supervision of the ceasefire. And sources in the Gaza Strip who are familiar with the discussions held by the factions in Cairo also say that there is agreement amongst them that the international forces will deploy only on the border with Israel and also with Egypt, and according to them, Hamas is not prepared for them to patrol throughout the Gaza Strip and discover the secret military infrastructure that it is building. In other words, Hamas is showing strategic patience and is trying to hold out until the end of President Trump's term, and then it plans to reassert control over the entire Gaza Strip. However, the negotiations being conducted in Egypt and Gaza's future may expose regional disagreements. Turkey and Qatar support Hamas as a central political actor, while Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates seek to strengthen the status of the Palestinian Authority in the Gaza Strip. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on the subject, so keep spreading the truth. And it's important for you to share this information because there are so many lies that are spread about what's happening in Israel, and we need your help in spreading the truth. And now we're shifting our focus to a quick report from Judea and Samaria. During the offensive operation by anti-terrorist forces last night between Monday and Tuesday in the village of Kaud, in the Menashe Brigade sector, security forces operated under the Shin Bet direction and with the IDF support to thwart a terrorist cell that planned to carry out an attack and took part in the terrorist organization in the Jenin camp. And during the operation, the forces identified the terrorist cell exiting a cave, and a unit of snipers executed precise fire and eliminated all of them. And shortly afterward, in an airstrike that was carried out by the Air Force to hit the cave from which they emerged in order to damage the terrorist infrastructure and the cave itself. Now, we move to reports from our northern neighbor, where Hezbollah is trying to recover. But first, I want to invite you to click on the like button, leave a comment, and share this video to help us reach more people around the world. So, the Kan news portal in Israel reported on Monday evening that in recent months, Hezbollah succeeded in smuggling hundreds of short-range rockets from Syria into Lebanese territory. Senior American officials who visited Israel in the past week were updated on this. In their meetings with the Prime Minister and the senior security officials, Israel requested to continue striking in Lebanon as this is a violation of the agreement. And the IDF has managed to thwart part of the smuggling, but not all of it. In Lebanon, there is a growing sense that the likelihood of a confrontation with Israel is very high, and that it cannot be prevented. And according to the source, who was then in Beirut, the reason in Israel's desire to see Hezbollah completely disarmed, but it is impossible to complete this process 100%. Therefore, according to this source, Israel will always have a reason to attack Hezbollah inside Lebanon, with the allegation that the Lebanese government is not doing enough to dismantle this terrorist organization. Alongside this, the Western sources said that the Lebanese army is very focused on the process of concentrating the weapons in the hands of the state, mainly south of the Litani River, which is closer to the border with Israel, and doing that away from the public eye. However, the actions of the Lebanese National Army are taking too long and not doing far enough. In the estimates of many in Israel's intelligence and the military echelon, therefore, there is a growing consensus that we are approaching the decision point on the next steps in the northern front against Lebanon. I'm very curious to understand what all of you have to say about this, so let me know in the comments. Do you think that Israel will go into another war in Lebanon against Hezbollah to destroy them completely? Let me know what you think. At this point, it's a bit too early to tell, but this is an excellent point to be praying for, because there is a potential for this problem to get much, much bigger. And here, TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all the truth about what's happening in Israel, and we need your help to share this information. And the best thing that you can do is hit the subscribe button. That's how YouTube and the algorithm works, and that's how we will reach more people. And now, we're keeping our focus on the northern front, but shifting slightly further up, we see our large, wealthy, and very powerful neighbor, Turkey. And this country has had a complicated relationship with Israel over the decades, and right now, we're kind of at a very low point. In fact, there is even a question arising about whether Turkey is afraid of Israel, and that might partially explain a massive $11 billion deal that Turkey just signed to buy weapons, ammunition, and military equipment from the United Kingdom. The highlight of this large purchase is 20 new Eurofighter Typhoon aircrafts, which will allow Turkey to begin recapitalizing its air force in light of regional developments, including Israel's brilliant air campaign against Iran during the 12-day war in June. The signing ceremony for the purchase of the jets and the other equipment was held during the visit of Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the President's Palace in Ankara in Turkey this week, where he was received with full military honors and a red carpet. And Turkish President Erdogan said that after the signing, we view this step as a new symbol of the strategic relations between the two close allies. Starmer said that the deal would strengthen the security of NATO members, deepen security cooperation between the countries, and additionally ensure about 20,000 British jobs in the aircraft productions. At the same time, the Reuters news agency reported last week, citing a source familiar with the details, that Turkey is also close to completing a deal to purchase 12 Eurofighter aircrafts previously used by Oman and Qatar as an interim solution until the delivery of the planes from Britain will make it. Turkey's own fifth-generation Khan fighter is reportedly years away from being available, and operating a 4.5 generation jet like the Typhoon will prepare Turkey's Air Force to receive it when it comes. Turkey, which is a NATO member, has sought to purchase the Eurofighter since 2023, but talks stalled due to Britain's refusal to grant an export license, owing to concerns over Ankara's foreign policy. And according to the French news agency AFP, talks advanced after Germany lifted its veto on the sales in July against the backdrop of Turkey's stance regarding the war in Gaza. Germany is one of the co-producing nations of the Eurofighter program along with Britain, Italy, and Spain, and therefore it has a veto power over its export to other countries. It's also important to point out that in 2019, the United States removed Turkey from the F-35 fighter project after Ankara purchased Russian S-400 air defensive systems. And in recent months, the American administration has been promoting a compromise that would allow Turkey to purchase the advanced aircrafts that are at the heart of Israel's air power. Also last year, Turkey advanced talks to purchase 40 F-16 fighter jets from the United States, but their delivery has since been delayed. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development vis-a-vis the power and the shifting of powers in this region, and we invite you to make sure to hit the like, leave a comment, and subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube, and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Next, we're shifting our focus to the south, where on Sunday, the Houthi rebels in Yemen broke into the United Nations Refugee Agency headquarters in Sana'a, Yemen's capital, and detained several United Nations employees for hours before releasing them. They also seized vital data from the Commission's computers, including the database of displaced persons and refugees, leading to the suspension of official communications between the headquarters and its branches. The incident came one day after a break-in at the United Nations Envoy's office in Yemen and at the headquarters of the Food and Agricultural Organization in the southern parts of Yemen in Sana'a, whose contents were also looted by the Houthis. And according to local sources, this is part of a series of ongoing violations by the Houthi terrorist organizations against international and also local institutions in Sana'a. Reports indicate that the Houthis have been imposing severe restrictions on United Nations activities in areas under their control since 2021, including facility break-ins and the systematic detention of local workers who are sometimes released in exchange for financial deals or also assistance. And according to United Nations data, about 60 local employees are still being held in detention. And here at TBN Israel, we'll try to keep the spotlight on these stories so that you will know what's happening and how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So if you want to help us, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we move to a report that contains what the Hamas terrorist organization is doing in the Gaza Strip, why it needs to be eradicated from the ground up, and how hypocritical it is within the social fabric via the Gaza Strip. Last month, it became known that an employee of the production company PMP, which worked with the German broadcaster ZDF, the second largest in the country, lost his life in an IDF strike in the Gaza Strip. Subsequently, Germany demanded clarifications from Israel, which responded by handing over evidence that this employee was a Hamas terrorist. And following this, ZDF announced that they would suspend the work with the PMP production company until further notice. To recall, The 37-year-old engineer was responsible for the company's broadcasting systems, and he lost his life on October 19 in an Israeli strike that hit the company's site in the city of Deir el-Balach in the central area of Gaza. The son of another employee was also killed in that same strike. At ZDF, they said that Israel responded to their request to clarify the identity of the deceased and provided a document indicating that the engineer was a member of Hamas's military wing, the Izzadin el-Qassam brigades. However, the documents did not specify when and how he operated within the organization or what rules he filled. As stated, following the information, the broadcaster announced the suspension of cooperation with the production company until the examination is completed, and the network said that it treats the allegations with great seriousness and will examine the case and the activities of the company as a whole. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on everything that's happening in Israel, so make sure to remember that this is a spiritual war. How do we fight a spiritual war? We pray. So, just moments before I'm entering the Gaza Strip, make sure to pray for IDF soldiers, make sure to pray for me, for my family to be safe, and for the truth to come out. God is in control. Let's pray for His support, His supervision, and His wisdom. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.